Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindie Chavez here. Today is Wednesday, December the 5th, 2018. It is 8 a.m. New York time. That's 5 a.m. Los Angeles time. It's 1 p.m. in London, and in Sydney, Australia, it's 12 midnight. So thank you, Sydney, Australia, for tuning in. We love you too. And this is another Daily Dose of Happy where we're exploring the writings of Neville Goddard. We've been making a lot of progress, Cindy, the last few days that we've been doing this. I mean, we're up to chapter 11. We're cruising through this thing,
right?
I mean, holy cow! This is not our normal pattern. Now, maybe it has to do with the fact that the chapters are a bit on the short side, but nevertheless, we deserve some credit too. You know, it's good stuff. And
we've been known to take a short chapter and spend a week on it. So
we could do that with a single sentence. I mean, we break it down. We break it down to single words. And what's this word about? We'll do that for 45 minutes. Yeah, which makes it fun. Wanted to tell you about something. I don't know if I told you this yesterday, but on Sunday during Sunday's podcast, I proposed the idea of a new group which I've created on Facebook called Pivot Pals. Based on the idea of pivoting, and it's basically for people who are deliberate creators, fairly advanced, wanting to have a mutual support system for changing their messages, changing their old stories to their new stories, and it's often helpful to have that kind of support because it's one way to keep telling the new story instead of the old story. I mean, we have a tendency to continue to tell our old stories in part because that's what most of the people in our lives expect us to tell. If we start telling a news story, they raise their eyebrows. They're saying, "What's wrong with you? What have you had to drink lately?" And so you need kind of a safe place to do that. So I created the group, and we've got 10 members in it now. So I'm going to post in the chat for this live stream. If anyone wants to join the group, I'll give you a link where you can go join it. And we encourage people to come in because we're going to start doing our old story, new story thing, and anybody who wants to be a part of practicing pivoting, we would welcome you. So join the Pivot Pals group.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, the pivot has been such an incredible tool for me.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so important. I can understand how having support for it because, like you said, our brain wants to go back to what's easy and familiar and just keep telling that old story that just rolls off our tongue like no problem.
It's crazy.
Like automatic. Yeah.
I mean, we're so good at that. And we're so good at that. Literally, Cindy, I have gotten to the point now where I've become really determined to change things up. Because like Abraham points out, if you want to know what story you've been telling, look around you at your life. Right. That's the story you've been telling. And my story hasn't been changing enough. And I'm really that's a joke, but it's also serious. I'm really frustrated with the fact that my story isn't changing enough. Because we talk about this every single episode, all the different ways we talk about the fact that when we change our stories, we change our vignettes, we change our visions and our imaginings and so forth, that's what turns into reality. And yet, I've spent so little time actually changing my reality by changing my story. So I'm determined. This is not just something I'm doing to help other people. This is for me, as well as for everybody else. Because I'm going to start changing that story in a big way. And I even put my first old story, new story post in the group today. So I kind of got the whole thing kicked off. Yeah. And it's kind of it's therapeutic, really. I didn't realize it was going to be that, but when the way I'm writing it and encouraging people to write is to write the old story out. Just tell the old story and then follow it with a new story. And doing it in that order. I mean, very often we're instructed to, just start telling your new story. That's what Abraham says. And that's good. But when you start by telling the old story and then switch to the new story, that's the therapeutic part that I'm noticing. It feels different. It feels better. It feels like I'm actually making a change because I said the old one first, and then I followed it with a new one, and basically it's like it's like a deliberate switch taking place. Like I am now making the change. I am deliberately saying, yes, here's my new story, and I'm putting it out there. It feels different when you do it that way. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
You know what it reminds me of is when you see these home makeovers. And you see a before and after picture,
Yes, right.
Right? Like someone could show you the after picture and say, look at this room. You say, oh, that's nice. And then look what it looked like before. Oh. Right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes, I agree, writing out that story, an exercise that I've actually given to clients before, I haven't done this in a long time, but you reminded me of it today, is if your life was a movie, right, what would it say on, well, way back in the day, we would say on the box that the video cassette came in.
Right.
You don't have a video cassette anymore, right? But what would the blurb say? How would it describe you, your life, your feelings? Because when you think about it, when you pick up something, a story, a movie, a book, and you read the little blurb about the person in the book, the main character, right, the protagonist, you read it, and it just gives you a few sentences, but usually it sums up that person's experience, right?
Right.
Whether they're sad or frustrated or lonely or they're hating their job and all that kind of thing. And oftentimes it is a story that sounds like an old story because the point of the book or the movie is to show this transformation of the person becoming something, wonderful or creating a life they love. And that's the victory part. That's the part that creates a big smile on our face as we watch it. We go, oh, that's wonderful. Look how far they've come. And so, I think it's great. It's a wonderful tool. And then to remember that, you said a minute ago you were feeling frustrated that you hadn't changed your life, that you're watching saying same old. I'm ready to change my story and change my life. Remember that there's a period of time that so often even savvy conscious creators forget. And that is in manifestation, there's really 3 steps. And I liken it to planting a garden. We plant the seeds, and then of course we water the seeds, and then we want to see the manifestation. We want to see the flowers bloom. But there's really this long period of waiting after we plant the seeds where we walk by that little plot every day and it's just a patch of dirt, a patch of dirt, a patch of dirt, a patch of dirt.
Yep.
Oh, when is this going to change? And a lot of times we give up. We say, maybe I'm doing something wrong. I'm going to dig those seeds up. I'm going to plant something new. Maybe I should be doing a different thing. Maybe, right? And we don't give it time. And so in that metaphor, how do we water and give sunshine to the seeds? We do it with our story.
Mm-hmm.
We tell the new story over and over. And it's that portion of time, that waiting period, I think, that's really difficult sometimes because we really want to see results. That's why we see all these posts sometimes in different law of attraction Facebook groups, right, where people will say, I'm doing the things and I'm
doing it, yeah.
Thing, right?
What happened?
Where is it? Why is it not coming? It's like, it's on the way. Neville says it's already here.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's right, of course. I agree with you. In fact, I think that's one of the strengths of telling the new story because it gives us something to do while we're waiting for the sprouts to come up through the ground. We can, and that's actually one of the motivations I had because it is, first of all, so difficult to tell the story to anyone but yourself because most of the people in your life won't believe you anyway and will think you're half cocked for doing it.
Because it's not true. Walt. Look around.
It's not true. What's wrong with you? You got to be realistic. So you got that going on, and then on top of that, your own confidence level isn't all that great because if they won't believe it, why should you believe it? So I mean, on the one hand, we really desperately need to tell that story because that helps us get through. On the other hand, we don't feel like we're safe to tell that story. Well, that's not a good scenario to be in. So that was a big motivation behind creating the group because that provides a safe place for people to tell the story and tell it over and over again and share it with other people and get feedback from other people and have other people say, wow, I love your story and so forth. Oh, that was great. Oh, had you thought about adding this to it? All that kind of thing. Because that's how we tell the story over and over again and while we're waiting for the sprout to grow through the ground.
Right? Instead of us, I'm just going to go sit on the porch and watch these seeds.
An old cliche about a washed pot comes to mind.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. That's so true. It's so true. It just takes forever. Oh, well, that's great. That's wonderful news.
Yeah.
I love the idea of supporting that pivot.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
I liked it when I came up with the name too, Pivot Pals. It has a nice, sound to it, the double P sound. So, yeah.
One of the things that that alliteration, it works.
Oh, alliteration's great. Yeah.
One of the things that you'll see in some like success books, especially ones that are a little more metaphysical and understand some of these concepts, is to find people who will support your vision.
Mm.
Like I've actually read in some books where it says, okay, now you don't want to probably just share this with everybody because there will be certain people who will, maybe not intentionally, but crush your dreams by saying, well, that's not a good idea, or that's not going to happen, or that's ridiculous, or what do you want, a miracle? Yes, actually, we do.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, but finding people who are cheerleaders for you. I mean, that's one of the things coaches do, right? Is we're there to hold a vision for our people. Like we say, yes, I know you can do this. I do see this happening for you.
Mm-hmm.
That can make all the difference sometimes, is to have that support. So congratulations on a great idea.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to see what's going to happen because some of the people who signed up were among our most faithful, regular listeners, and they're the ones who show up repeatedly. So I figure they're also going to be fairly active in the group, and that's what you want. It doesn't matter if you're starting off small. What matters is, are you active? And if you got a lot of activity, activity breeds activity.
Absolutely. Well, talk about small. I think we had this conversation before about Lynn McTaggart's book, The Power of Eight.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, and Lynn started seeing miracles happen in groups that she was running that were small groups, 8 people. That's not a big group.
No, it's not. It's pretty
they
small.
They were holding the vision for each other. They were spending a certain amount of time each day, a small amount of time each day, all holding a vision for each other, whatever that vision was for. If someone was looking for healing, someone was looking for more, better financial situation, whatever they were looking for, the group mind would hold that vision, and they started to see really miraculous things happen. And then she wrote a book and created a course around it. So,
right.
Yeah, so size is not what matters here as far as groups. We can have that power in a small group. I've been in plenty of mastermind groups as well that were just a handful of people and got a lot done. So, hey,
that's true.
Excellent.
Yeah. I love the phrase that you use, to hold the idea, or to hold the person. And I realized as you were saying that when we read someone else's story, we are in that moment holding them in our minds.
We are. We're holding that.
Just the act of reading it. Just nothing else. Just reading. And then, of course, if we react to it, then we're holding it even longer and we're putting some more power behind it. But it shows just how little it takes to hold somebody else in your mind.
Yeah, we just have to do it.
Yeah. Well, more than that, I mean, just reading the story. You don't even have to do anything beyond reading the story, and you've done it. That's the part that really gets me. Like it's really minimal in terms of how much you have to do.
Yeah. Our minds are powerful.
They certainly are. Yeah, no doubt about it. So.
Well, that's a great announcement. Any
Thank
more?
You. Sure. Yeah. Well, there's also the standard announcement. If you're not yet a subscriber, what are you waiting for? We're putting the links for subscribing, or at least the URLs for subscribing, in all the descriptions that we can, where we're posting the video and the podcast recording. And if you don't find a link there that you can use, or a URL you can use, just go to the homepage of our website, loatoday.net, and you'll find links there that are really easy to click, and then you just walk your way through the steps that come up, because it walks you through it. You don't have to even know how to do it. And then beyond that, make sure that you're sharing on social media the fact that you're listening, because that's how the word gets spread. That's how more and more people get their daily dose of happy. That's how we ended up with our small group starting the Pivot Pals Club. Just because people share the information. That's how you found out about LOA Today, most likely. Somebody shared with you. And, that's key. So, pass it along and help other people find it too. Because the more and more people who find this stuff, and the more and more people who learn to take their daily dose of happy every day, to take the pill, to take the blue pill, or the red pill. I'm not sure which one's the right one anymore. But to take the pill and get your daily dose. I just think about that a lot. I think about what happens when so many people are starting their days off or even finishing their days off feeling better just because of tuning into our program. I mean, that's an exciting prospect for me. That's part of my new story, by the way.
Oh, I love that you said that, because for me, of course, it's early. It's even earlier for me than for you. So it's early in the morning here.
Yep.
So this is the beginning of my day.
Right.
But as you were naming the different cities that are listening, and Sydney, Australia, I think you said midnight.
Yeah.
It got me to thinking about because you just said starting your day or maybe finishing your day. And I thought, wow, think about Neville's whole idea of falling asleep.
Right.
While you're assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Yeah.
So, whether you're starting the day or ending the day, or maybe both, so that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of inspiring.
Like that. Yeah. Well, we are working our way at lightning speed.
We are.
Neville Goddard's The Power of Awareness. We're on chapter 11. And I'm really proud of us that we're making our way through so quickly.
We're doing a good job.
It's been really good stuff so far. Mm-hmm. The title of this particular chapter is Interference.
Yeah, I'm curious about this one, to be honest.
I am too.
Yeah.
So Neville says, and here, this is going to line up with your Pivot Pals and your new story so
good.
Well. Look at this. You are free to choose the concept you will accept of yourself. That's that new story, people. That's it right there.
There it is.
Therefore, you possess the power of intervention, the power which enables you to alter the course of your future. The process of rising from your present concept to a higher concept of yourself is the means of all true progress. Mm-hmm. The higher concept is waiting for you to incarnate it in the world of experience. So interesting that we've spent the first moments of the podcast today talking about old stories and new stories. Mm. And I didn't know what this chapter was going to be.
I didn't know either. I mean, this is LOA again.
Right? So I love this. I actually want to read this paragraph again because it's so powerful.
Okay.
Therefore, you possess the power of intervention, the power which enables you to alter the course of your future. The process of rising from your present concept, that's that old story, right?
Right.
To a higher concept of yourself is the means of all true progress. The higher concept is waiting for you to incarnate it in the world of experience.
And the higher concept, of course, is the new story.
Yeah, and that story is out there just waiting for us to make it real in our world. Wow.
And I
love that he says it is the means of all true progress.
Mm-hmm. It is.
This
and
new story.
It makes me think about oh geez. Well, forget what it makes me think about because it just went out of my mind. Just keep going.
Okay, so now we've come up to a part where Neville's going to quote a scripture from Ephesians, the New Testament. He says, "Now unto him that is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us, unto him be glory." Him that is able to do more than you can ask or think, now this is Neville, is your imagination. Mm. And the power that works in us is your attention. Understanding imagination to be him that is able to do all that you ask, and attention to be the power by which you create your world, you can now build your ideal world.
Very cool.
I feel like a kid that just opened a big box of Lego, right? It's like, okay, there it is. Do it. You can now build it now.
Either that or else you just opened up a Cracker Jack box and got the prize, one or the other.
Well, I think that's what we want sometimes, right? We want to just open the box and there's the prize.
Yep.
But maybe there's some building on our part here.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
Imagine yourself to be the ideal you dream of and desire. Remain attentive to this imagined state. And as fast as you completely feel that you are already this ideal, it will manifest itself as reality in your world. So that's an interesting idea there. We were talking about waiting on the seeds to sprout. But Neville is saying if we remain attentive to the imagined state, to the new concept of ourselves, everything we dream and desire to be, that as fast as we can completely feel that we already are that ideal, that's how fast it manifests.
Exactly what we were talking about with the old story, new story.
Right.
Yep.
He goes on to, now remember, he is saying he is your imagination.
Imagination, right.
And most people will read this verse as he being Jesus or God.
Right.
But he says he was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. So imagination was in the world, and the world was made by imagination, and the world knew imagination not.
Yeah, that last part's the really interesting one, in my view, because what it's saying is we're not using our imagination enough.
And I think it's because of that last part, because we don't recognize the power that it has.
Mm-hmm.
And an interesting thing in one of Neville's books, it might have been the book that has imagination in the title. But he talks about the word imagination and how it gets used in all sorts of ways that are either good or bad or positive or negative. You know, it's like he talks about people saying, well, just use your imagination. Or someone saying, this is a man of imagination, like holding someone on a pedestal because they're so creative. This is a man of imagination. And then in the same, breath saying, oh, it's all in your imagination.
Yeah, right.
It's like, and so we use that word in a way sometimes that contradicts the other usages of it. Mm-hmm.
It's true.
And it makes me think about that, what we think of when we talk about the word imagination. I love this stuff and I totally buy into this idea. And yet when I hear that word imagination, I can easily think of it as just something, like a word cloud above a cartoon head. It's just nebulous.
It's almost like we dismiss it. It's like we stop giving it any kind of credence, like it's not important or something, when it's the most important thing that there is.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting that he says that he uses this verse saying that the world doesn't really know imagination. Meaning, when we think about if we know a person, because he's using a pronoun he, but we think about if you ask me if I know a particular person, and I say not really. Mm-hmm. I don't really know her.
Right.
I don't really know him. I know of them, Or no, maybe I just say no, never heard of them. Who is that? And so, how could I ever benefit from that particular person's ideas or wisdom or power? I don't even know who you're talking about. That's what he's saying here, is that the imagination is here. The whole world was made by imagination, but the world doesn't recognize imagination.
By the way, before we go on with the chapter, I want to acknowledge a couple things. First of all, Deborah tuned in and said, thanks for applying the Neville decoder ring. Love the discussion. Listening in from Uppershoot, UK. So thank you, Deborah, for tuning in. And then I also have to acknowledge something else, and I don't know what's behind it. But, how when we're posting these live streams, people are commenting and liking and so forth. Well, we got one love like, actually it was from Deborah, and we got an angry person. Jamie expressed anger, and I don't know why. So I'm just going to ask Jamie, tell us what you're upset about, because we'd like to know. Put something into the comments. It's the first one I've ever seen. We've never had an angry one before.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah, nothing wrong with it.
About this.
Yeah.
All of our feelings and emotions are important and valid and giving us great information that we need. So yeah, what feels frustrating right now? Maybe it's just the whole idea that the world doesn't understand how powerful imagination is. Neville goes on to say, the mystery hid from the ages. And this is another verse. He says, Christ in you, the hope of glory. Now remember, we know from past readings of Neville that when he talks about Christ in you, again, he's talking about imagination. Mm-hmm. And so what he's saying here is that our imagination is our hope of glory. That's our hope, to get the things, to create the world that we want.
Right.
It's not always that we want to get things. When I said that, I really mean experiences as well, right?
Oh, God, yes.
Situations, opportunities, things, experiences. When I see that phrase, the hope of glory, I think that's our hope of having the world we want to have.
Right. Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
So Neville goes on to say, the he, in the first of these quotations, is your imaginations. As previously explained, there is only one substance. The substance is consciousness. And see, I love this because, again, when I hear the word consciousness, the word imagination, I don't often think of it as having substance. But he is saying that there's only one substance, and the substance is consciousness. It is your imagination which forms this substance into concepts, which concepts are then manifested as conditions, circumstances, and physical objects. So there's those things and opportunities and events, right?
Exactly.
Thus, imagination made your world. This supreme truth, with but few exceptions, man is not conscious of.
I wonder what the exceptions were that he had in mind.
Well, you, me. We're the exceptions.
Okay, because we're
aware
of this.
Of this truth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to be an exception. How nice.
Right. We're exceptional.
We're exceptional. Hey.
What we really want is for everyone to get it, right?
Yeah.
That's why we're doing this. But
exactly.
It's so interesting to read this idea and the recognition that this is why we do things like create the Pivot Pals group. This is why we find people who are like-minded to support us, because man, generally, woman, people are not conscious of these ideas.
It's true. Yeah, that's true. And we want to have more. I mean, it's one of the things that I wrote into my old story news story, that I wrote into the Pivot Pals group. Part of my news story, well, part of my old story also was that Louise and I want to have more of what we call LOA friends, people who are deliberate creators and who are expanding their friendship horizons and so forth. And in the news story, it was, we already have the friends and we're enjoying it. We're thrilled by it. And that really is a big part of my dream. I mean, I just love the idea of having in my own little world, a little world full of people who are LOA friends, and then just taking that imagination another step further and thinking of an entire globe full of LOA friends. And that starts to get really exciting. I mean, that's where the chills start running up and down my spine because I think about, wow, that could create stuff that I can't even begin to fathom at this point.
Yeah, definitely. When you think about the power of that mastermind.
Oh, good grief, wow. Oh.
So Neville winds out this chapter explaining the second part of the verse that he talked about, the mystery hid from the ages, Christ in you, the hope of glory. He says the mystery, Christ in you, referred to in the second quotation, is your imagination.
Just what you said.
By which your world is molded. The hope of glory is your awareness of the ability to rise perpetually to higher levels. Christ is not to be found in history nor in external forms. You find Christ only when you become aware of the fact that your imagination is the only redemptive power. When this is discovered, the towers of dogma will have heard the trumpets of truth, and like the walls of Jericho, crumble to dust.
That word redemptive always throws me a little bit because it has very definite religious connotations to it. But he has a very specific meaning about it that's a little bit different from what the traditional religious interpretation is. And yet, even when I know that, I think to myself, what am I, a coupon? I'm being redeemed?
Well, it's funny because I think we talked about this a few podcasts back, but recently, my husband and I were talking about, we saw an actor, and I said, hey, wasn't that guy in the movie about blah, 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 and he said, yeah. And then we both recognized what character he played, this actor in the other movie we were talking about. Mm-hmm. And he was just not a nice person. Mm. And he cheated on his girlfriend, and he just thought he was just all that, and he was just kind of full of himself. And, he really played the part well, because immediately you're like, oh, this guy, right? I said, oh, yeah, I remember the role he played. And one of us asked the other one, said, did that character ever redeem himself? Mm. And what we meant was, by the end of the movie, did he come around? Did he become a nice person, a helpful person, a kind person? Did he feel bad about his past deeds, right? And so in this, when I see Neville saying this, your imagination is the only redemptive power, I'm thinking old story, new story. We want to redeem ourselves. We want to make it better. We want to create a story that's better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm ready.
But I got another question for you, though. Because let's play the same game with the title of the chapter. Because he actually never uses the word interference anywhere in the chapter. It's only in the title. The closest he uses...
Intervention he used.
He used intervention, right, but not interference. Yeah. And it sounds like he's actually equating intervention with interference. And I'm not quite sure what that's about. Why interference? Do you have any ideas on that?
Well, I think that we are, of course, I always think of football. And intervention, I always say, I'm using these words that he's writing back in the 1950s and thinking of them in ways they get used today. Intervention often gets used when someone has a problem and, friends or family members are trying to rescue them from, themselves, right? And so I think both of these words can be used as we are kind of running interference with ourselves to that old story. And we're doing an intervention with ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. We're saying, okay, like you said earlier, it's like, okay, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of not seeing some big changes. I'm ready for some big changes here. I'm going to change my story. I feel like these words are really applicable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think, intervention certainly is, because I can see how I am, like you said, I am proposing to intervene in my old story and turn it into a new story. So intervene works for me. Interference is a little bit strange. I mean, I think about the word interference from a physics perspective or from a electrical perspective, electricity. Interference is like, anybody who had an old style television knows what interference is, because interference is where your TV signal turns to snow. And it's just, that snowy picture. That's interference. Whether it be interference due to the fact that you didn't have an antenna or due to the fact that somebody was jamming the signal or whatever else, but that's interference. Something is interfering with the signal. And if I think about it that way, then interference, I guess, is where there's something in the way of us using our imagination in this context. Because the context, again, is all about imagination, right? And whether we're going to use it, and how often we often don't use it, and why it's so important to use it. So if interference is the title of the chapter, I'm not really sure which way to go with it. Is it interfering in the old pattern of not using imagination to start using it, which is kind of a backward way of getting there? Is it identifying all the fact that we have all these different reasons in place that keep us from exploring imagination and using imagination? I don't know. I'm kind of reaching. I'm not sure what to do with that word interference. It's interesting that he chose it. There's got to be a deliberate reason, because he's very specific about the use of his words. And that's why I'm thinking there's a clue in here somewhere. I just don't know where.
Right. And what comes to mind for me as well is, first, keeping in mind the title of the actual book, The Power of Awareness.
Yeah.
And remember how he said, imagination was in the world and the world knew him not.
Right.
Like the world at large not being aware of the power of imagination. And when he starts with interference, the first sentence, you are free to choose the concept you will accept of yourself. And it's like, I think that knowledge is, interfering, right? We need to not let things interfere.
Mm-hmm.
We need to stay aware and open our awareness, because that's what happens is the rest of the world starts interfering in our in our focus.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
We were talking about the old timey TV and how, oh no, there's interference. The picture's gone. We can't bring it in. I see that as, the entire experience of our life can get in the way of us having focus if we lose that awareness. We lose the signal, so to speak, and we get caught up in other things that are going on. We forget that we have the power to create our reality and our future.
In other words, as he says,
that's what I think of when I hear it.
So where he says, remain attentive to this imagined state, and as fast as you completely feel that you are already this ideal, it will manifest itself as reality in your world, is sort of the inverse of what happens when you're interfering, or there is interference where you're not remaining attentive. So, yeah, okay, I see where you're going with that. Still an interesting choice for a chapter title. He has this tendency, he does this a lot, he uses a term and then defines it later. Many writers will define a term before they start using it regularly. He defines it afterward. So I'm wondering if maybe he's going to define interference in a future chapter in a more defined way, so that we can point back and say, oh, that's what he meant by interference, and add one more cue to our decoder ring.
Possibly. Well, chapter 12, the title of the next chapter, which we'll get right to, is called Subjective Control.
Okay, well, let's find out.
So we'll see what he says about that. He says your imagination is able to do all that you ask in proportion to the degree of your attention.
Mm.
All progress, all fulfillment of desire depends upon the control and concentration of your attention. Attention may be either attracted from without or directed from within.
Mm-hmm.
Attention is attracted from without when you're consciously occupied with the external impressions of the immediate present. The very lines of this page are attracting your attention from without.
Right, sure.
Now, interesting enough is I feel like this is where interference sometimes happens, right?
This is true.
Something catches our attention from without, and it's interfering with, right? It's like that idea that we talked about way back when we did Old Story, New Story in the Money and the Law of Attraction. The idea of, I'm wealthy. It's all here for me. I have it already. I feel rich. Oh, no. Look at my bank statement.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
My bank statement just attracted my attention from
right.
without and interfering with this story. So he says, the very lines of this page are attracting your attention from without. Your attention is directed from within when you deliberately choose what you will be preoccupied with mentally. It is obvious that in the objective world, your attention is not only attracted by, but is constantly directed to external impressions. But your control in the subjective state is almost non-existent, for in this state, attention is usually the servant and not the master, the passenger and not the navigator of your world. There is an enormous difference between attention directed objectively and attention directed subjectively, and the capacity to change your future depends on the latter. So it looks like subjective control is very important.
Well, yeah, it is, and I'm interested in his choice of the words objective and subjective, mainly because I've given a lot of thought to those words over the decades. Like for many, many years, I've given thought to them, and I've actually come to the conclusion that there is no such thing as objectivity. We like to say that there is, but really, I don't think there's anything that's objective in the world. I think it's all subjective. So I'm curious to know what he's thinking about the word objective, particularly. Also subjective. He's saying subjective is the more powerful one. That certainly makes sense to me. But I wonder what he has in mind about objective. I don't know the answer to that. He says,
when you're able to control the movements of your attention in the subjective world, you can modify or alter your life as you please. But this control cannot be achieved if you allow your attention to be attracted constantly from without.
So I wonder if the objective world is then the external world. I wonder if it's an equivalent word for external.
Well, and what sometimes people refer to as what is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I'm saying that with, quotes around it in a very law of attraction kind of frame.
Yeah.
Right? When we say what is, we're talking about what we see with our eyes, what we're experiencing with our senses, with our eyes open, right? Not in the imaginal state where we're assuming the feeling of a wish when we're rehearsing our vignette of what we want to happen, but that what is that people call reality.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's what I see about control cannot be achieved if you allow your attention to be attracted constantly by what is. But he says from without.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Each day, set yourself the task of deliberately withdrawing your attention from the objective world and of focusing it subjectively. So here again, we're taking the time to imagine.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I see that, right?
Yeah. And also, he's drawing the parallel that objective refers to the external world, subjective is internal. So take your attention away from the external, put it into the internal. Take it from the objective, put it on the subjective. That seems to be the way he's using the words fairly consistently.
In other words, concentrate on those thoughts or moods which you deliberately determine. Then those things that now restrict you will fade and drop away. The day you achieve control of the movements of your attention in the subjective world, you are master of your fate. You will no longer accept the dominance of outside conditions or circumstances. You will not accept life on the basis of the world without. So yes, on the basis of the external world.
Right.
Having achieved control of the movements of your attention and having discovered the mystery hid from the ages, that Christ in you is your imagination, you will assert the supremacy of imagination and put all things in subjection to it.
So with this concept now of objective and subjective, and specifically of subjective control, I think he's starting to kind of frame the name of the previous chapter, interference, because it's becoming clear interference is when it's objective, when it's external. That's where the interference is coming from.
Right. And it goes back to that, it goes right back to that, all of those arguments that we make where we're arguing for our limitations.
Yes. We do that really well.
We do, right?
Yep.
But it is, and we're convinced of them.
Mm-hmm.
There's an idea, Neville uses the word assumption, and it's a powerful word. Many times the assumptions that we have are based on past experience,
mm-hmm.
and they help us argue for our limitations because we say, no, but every time I tried this, blah, 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 and
right.
It didn't work.
Right.
And so I think that's the interference,
mm-hmm.
is that we are attracted by things going on externally.
Yeah, it seems to be adding up that way. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, our attention, our awareness.
You realize we're about to break another record. We're about to do 3 chapters in one episode.
All right. Let's see. Chapter 13. Now watch, it's going to be really long.
Well, given the title of it, I wouldn't be terribly surprised because this is a topic that we spend a lot of time on in general, whether we're talking about Neville or not. So
the title of the 13th chapter is Acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And Neville says man's perceptions, he's actually quoting William Blake here, he says, man's perceptions are not bounded by organs of perception. He perceives more than sense, though ever so acute, can discover.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
However much you seem to be living in a material world, you are actually living in a world of imagination. And we say this all the time, everything's all in our head.
Right.
The outer physical events of life are the fruit of forgotten blossom times, results of previous and usually forgotten states of consciousness. They are the ends running true to oft times forgotten imaginative origins. This is really interesting, that the things that are going on, that the seeds of them, we've forgotten about.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that happens a lot, actually.
Yeah, I think it does, and I think it's, Abraham talks about that buffer of time and how important it is.
Mm-hmm.
How important that we don't immediately manifest what we're imagining. And so
I can't remember what the name of the presenter was, but one of the presenters in The Secret mentioned that your current experience, what's going on right now, is not a reflection of what's going on in your mind right now. It's a reflection of what your mind was focused on. It's a reflection of where you were, not where you are.
And what was interesting was in that idea is the idea of time and a timeline and how long does it take? And people are asking this question all the time, right? Mm-hmm. They've learned these things and they recognize they can, consciously create something. And then they're like, why isn't it here? And how long does it take? And I've been trying to create this for a long time, or wow, that manifested so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one or the other. We even had a question recently, trying to remember it, but the person was asking about like, why do some things manifest so quickly and other things take a long time? And
right.
Right. And so it's interesting. That's why I was interested when Neville was telling those stories or relaying stories that were told to him. And the one person kept saying 3 weeks later.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
It's like 3 or 4 times they would create a scene that they wanted to experience. And then they would say they started focusing on it, holding it in their awareness every night. And then they would say 3 weeks later, it manifested.
Yep.
It kind of made me laugh. I was like, okay, we have somebody that's documented a timeline here. So people,
exactly.
3 weeks, it takes 3 weeks. No, there's all different amounts of time, but yeah, definitely. We forget about it.
By the way, speaking of questions, somebody asked a question which is not directly related, but I think we can tie it in fairly easily. Shreen is asking, is it possible to defeat depression and anxiety?
Anything is possible, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in the context of what we're talking about here, it's definitely possible when you follow Neville's formula, because Neville's formula is go within, not without. So.
Oh, yeah. Something that I've heard before that I believe is so true. 2 things that I think are important. One is it's kind of a cliche, but it's true. It says the fastest way to feel depressed is to start comparing yourself to everyone else.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what is that? That is something external getting our attention.
That's right. Talk about interference.
Hey, look at this over here. Right, exactly. And the other one is that we have seen from research that one of the things that will cause depression is a person feeling that their life has no purpose or no meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And the search for meaning, then, the corollary to that for me is that the search of meaning is very important for my mental health.
Sure.
Right? And so, and those again, once again, that is something that is subjective and not objective.
Now, Shreen doesn't
That's
actually.
An internal thing.
It is. Shreen doesn't actually ask how do you go about doing it, but let's take it one step further. She asked, is it possible to defeat depression and anxiety? And we say, yes, it is. So let's talk about how to do it. And let's try to do it if we can within Neville's model, because I think Neville actually has an interesting approach to it. It's a little bit different from what Abraham suggests. It's different from what a psychotherapist would suggest. but it has its own unique and I think meritorious approach. So, like if we're going to say how Neville approaches this, I mean, I'll take my swing at it, and then you tell me what you think. But I'm thinking that Neville is saying if you want to attract the opposite of anxiety and depression, probably the first thing to do is to identify what it is that you want. I mean, we've already said depression and anxiety. Pretty clear that's not what you had in mind that you really want. That's what you don't want because you said you wanted to defeat it. So what do you want instead? Where do you want to get to? What's that happier place for you? What's that better feeling place? And it's going to be a different answer, I think, for every person. But in general, it's going to be in the direction of feeling good, feeling happy, feeling, abundant, feeling a fulfilled life, feeling like I'm going places. Something along that line, right? Well, that starts with the imagination.
Yeah. And here's the thing, we've been talking about for all these chapters is the power of awareness and focused attention.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always an easy thing. It takes a lot of practice.
Especially if you're depressed.
I keep thinking, and I, in no way do I want to compare, a common cold to depression and anxiety. So I'm not doing that. But I am remembering, a year ago when I started feeling like I was getting that terrible cold. How hard it was when I would ask myself, because I would immediately say, no, I don't want this. I don't want to get sick. I don't want to feel this. What do I want?
Right.
I want to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because I don't want to be sick.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that wasn't the right answer. That's not the right answer. The right answer was bigger than that, deeper than that. But I couldn't think of it. It was hard to come up with.
Right.
And so it took me some brain power. Like I could feel my mind having to really think about this, it's like, cause I didn't feel well. It's like, well, why do I want to feel better?
Mm-hmm.
So I started coming up with reasons. What do I want? I want to wake up in the morning feeling great. I want to have energy to hop right out of bed. I want to be in good physical shape to do the things I need to do. I want my voice to be in good shape for the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to, breathe through my nose and,
yes.
and talk without a scratchy throat. And I would just keep going. I'm telling you though, 10 minutes later, when I started feeling like my throat was scratchy and like I had chills, it was really easy to go, oh no, I really feel bad. I don't want to feel like this. Why don't I want to feel? Because I want to feel better. How do I want to feel? And I just kept going with it. I just kept going. That was that concentrated attention. That was that focused awareness. So dealing with anxiety and depression, probably a much bigger thing than that. I would say, yes. Is it able to be defeated? Yes. And I don't know what all that might entail for every person. It may entail finding the right doctor. It may entail finding the right support systems. It may entail, a lot of other outside support brought in. Maybe not, maybe so. But what I do know is you can start here with what Neville's talking about and what you were talking about, Walt, and that is, yes, get clear on what you want and what that looks like.
Yes. And Shereen actually started to do that, by the way, because after we started talking about this and she got the idea that we needed to talk about what it is that we want instead of what we don't want, she typed in, I want to have good teeth with no dentures and I want to feel peace of heart and soul. So she's starting the process of defining it.
And that's the beginning. Listen to this. I mean, I love the way so often the things we're talking about, and even with questions coming in from outside, just weaves itself right into what we're reading.
Of course.
Because this is so perfect. Whenever you become completely absorbed in an emotional state, you are at that moment assuming the feeling of the state fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
If persisted in, whatsoever you are intensely emotional about, you will experience in your world. These periods of absorption, of concentrated attention, are the beginnings of the things you harvest. So there it is, right there.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
He says, it is in such moments that you are exercising your creative power, the only creative power there is. At the end of these periods, or moments of absorption, you speed from these imaginative states, where you've not been physically, to where you were physically an instant ago.
Mm-hmm.
In these periods, the imagined state is so real that when you return to the objective world and find that it's not the same as the imagined state, it's an actual shock.
It is.
You have seen something in imagination with such vividness that you now wonder whether the evidence of your senses can now be believed. And like Keats, you ask, was it a vision or a waking dream? Fled is that music. Do I wake or sleep?
By the way, I got to interject something here, because you and I have talked a bit about what's it called? Lucid dreaming.
Yes.
And I found myself doing a quick lucid dream last night, to my surprise.
Excellent.
Yeah. It didn't even have a storyline. It was more just a scene. It was like a room with computer monitors or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. And it only attained a degree of clear focus for about, 2 or 3 seconds, something like that. But the cool part was, first of all, I recognized that it was a dream state. Second of all, I got excited about the fact that I could actually see it for 2 or 3 seconds.
Yay!
to the point where I actually tried to reach out and touch them, and then I lost it. So
that's wonderful. See,
I was actually
making better progress than I am.
I was shocked. I woke up and said, "Wow, I really did that. How did I do that?"
Well, it's when you can really hone it in, like any other kind of focused attention, you can really use that for your conscious creation.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I was just impressed that it happened at all. It took a while. I mean, when did we last talk about that? I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So
yeah.
I guess my subconscious mind has been working on it, and I didn't even know it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, let's see. I'm looking at the clock.
Yeah, we got about 3 minutes left. I think we'll probably have to finish up the chapter this afternoon, which is okay. And we can go on to chapter 14 too. So that's a good thing. Before we go, I mean, I've been trying to do this more and more often because I feel like I've been shortchanging you lately. So I want you to tell people about the services you offer as a life coach and how they reach out to you and so forth.
Oh, yeah. Well, I do offer coaching, relationship coaching, life coaching, coaching around anything that, you may want some support around, really. And you can find me at my website, cindiechavez.com, CINDIECHAVEZ.com. And there are all kinds of things there. There's some wonderful free things there for you that you may find. And I have a product that I create every month for the new moon, which is coming up on Friday. And so I would love for you to reach out. Just reach out and say hello. You can also find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, same name, Cindie Chavez. That's my username on all of those platforms. So yeah, that'd be great. Would love to hear from you.
By the way, people don't know this, but I got a taste of it yesterday after the podcast when Cindie was telling me how many hours she puts in doing the drawings for this product that she puts out every month. I mean, she puts in intense amounts of work on it. And so, obviously if you just contact her about the free stuff, that's great. If you're interested in any of her, in her monthly product with the new moon, she puts a lot of time in on this thing. Let me tell you, you're getting great value out of that product.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, just a little bit about it so you understand what Walt's talking about. It's a digital product. There's a meditation and a little class describing what comes in the digital product. It's a PDF file. There's the audio file, MP3, and then there's a PDF. And part of it is journaling pages that I hand draw and that you can print when you buy them.
Yep.
So it's a fun product. It's not expensive. It's like $8. And the drawing, I usually do it all month and get it all ready for the new moon. But this month I had Thanksgiving and a wedding and all these things, and I kind of got behind, and so I had to do the drawings all at once. And there's about 10 hours of ink work in those pages. So, whew, that's a lot.
Well, you had a lot this past month. Getting married, that alone is enough for most people. And then to have Thanksgiving in the same month, yeah, I can understand why you didn't get all the drawing done. Sure, it makes a whole lot of sense. But, no, hey, this is great. And I look forward to carrying on the conversation about Neville this afternoon with you.
Wonderful. I'll be back this afternoon.
And we'll be back also. We hope that you'll join us next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody. Whoops.
Bye, everyone.
There we go.